I'd never felt so invisible. It was my birthday, and as the day unfolded, it became clear that no one in my family even remembered. No calls, no texts, nothing. I spent most of the day trying to pretend it didn't bother me, working through the emptiness, but after hours of staring at my phone like an idiot, hoping for some sort of acknowledgement, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to go to their house and confront them. Maybe it was childish, but honestly, I was hurt. I drove there, my heart heavy with anticipation, hoping for something, anything, just to let me know I wasn't forgotten. When I walked in, it wasn't a warm embrace, a birthday song, or even a "hey, happy birthday" that greeted me. Instead, I was met with the sound of my sister laughing too loudly at some TV show while my mom shuffled around in the kitchen. There was no recognition, no excitement in their eyes when they saw me. It was like they were completely unaware of why I'd come. I stood in the doorway for a moment, not knowing whether to stay or leave. It was clear this wasn't going to be the birthday I imagined. "Hey, what's up?" my sister asked, not even glancing at me, her eyes glued to the screen. I could barely force a smile. I was hurt, more than I cared to admit, and that smile felt more like a mask than anything else. "Just came to see how everyone was doing," I said, my voice steady, but inside I was screaming. Why was I even here? They hadn't even thought to text me, and now I was the one putting in the effort to show up. It felt pathetic. Mom turned to glance at me, but didn't say anything. She gave me a quick, distracted look, then went back to whatever she was doing. Not a happy birthday, not even a "how's your day been?" My stomach twisted as I realized this wasn't some oversight. They simply hadn't cared enough to remember. I tried to hold it together, but every minute that passed in that room felt like a reminder of how alone I was in my own family. It wasn't even just the silence about my birthday that stung. It was the coldness that followed. The indifference. It wasn't long before my sister, with a casual air, asked me, "Hey, I need your help with something. You know the boutique I've been eyeing? I really want this new dress, and they've got a sale on this designer collection, but I need $1,550. Can you lend me the money?" My stomach dropped. Did she really just ask me for that? $1,550? I could barely cover my own expenses, and she wanted me to give her that much for clothes? It was absurd, but what stung more was the way she asked, like I was obligated to say yes. Like I was supposed to drop everything to help her out. "I can't just give you that kind of money," I replied, trying to keep my voice even, but the frustration was bubbling up. "You know I don't have that much lying around." Her face hardened, and I could see the shift in her. The smile faded, and she looked at me like I had just denied her the one thing that would make her happy. "What do you mean? You've got money, don't you? You've always been able to help. Why is today any different?" Before I could respond, my mom cut in. "Come on, just help her out. She needs it." I stared at her, confused, anger beginning to stir inside me. She didn't even look up from what she was doing. "Help her out? You've got to be kidding me. I don't even have the cash for that kind of thing right now." But my mom wasn't hearing it. She turned, her expression blank, like I was being unreasonable. "We're family. You should help out when family needs it." "Family?" I repeated, almost laughing in disbelief. "What family? The family that forgot my birthday? The family that didn't even send a text or give me a call? That family?" The words came out before I could stop them. The silence that followed felt like a punch to the gut. My mom's face fell, her eyes narrowing like I had just betrayed her, and my sister's expression shifted from annoyance to something darker. The disappointment in the room was palpable. "You're being selfish," my mom said coldly, turning away. "You're acting like a child." A chill ran through me. Was she serious? I was the one being selfish. I was the one who hadn't been acknowledged today, and yet I was the one being blamed for not helping my sister out with an amount of money that I didn't have. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to make sense of what was happening. I had just walked into this house hoping for something, a simple happy birthday, maybe a conversation, something to make me feel like I mattered, but instead, I felt like I was just a tool to be used when it was convenient. I wasn't angry at my sister, really. She was just a kid, and maybe she didn't understand. But my mom, the woman who had raised me, the one who should have been the first to at least acknowledge my birthday, it was crushing. The words stuck in my throat, but I forced them out anyway. "You know what? Forget it. I'm leaving. I don't need this." And without waiting for a response, I grabbed my jacket and stormed out, the door slamming behind me. My heart was pounding in my chest, the weight of the entire situation crushing down on me. As I drove away from their house, I couldn't help but wonder if I was invisible to them. Would it have made a difference if I had just stayed home? Would they have even noticed I was gone? The drive back was quiet, but the silence in my car was deafening. I couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment. My own family had forgotten me, and now they were mad at me for not helping out with money. It wasn't just a bad birthday. It was a wake-up call. The following days didn't get any better. If anything, they got worse. I tried to push the memory of that night out of my head. It was just a bad day, I told myself. I didn't need to overthink it. But I couldn't stop. Every time I saw my phone or glanced at the time, I could feel that knot in my stomach tighten again. The silence from my family was deafening. No texts, no calls. The silence felt like a punishment. The kind that cut deeper than any words could. The worst part was how they acted like nothing had happened. I saw my sister a few days later when she came over to borrow a book. She smiled at me, just like always. "Hey, I was thinking of getting this dress in a different color," she said casually, leaning against the door frame as if the last time we talked hadn't been an argument that was still hanging in the air. The same argument where I was blamed for not having $1,550 to throw at her fashion whims. My blood started to boil all over again, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Did you get the dress?" I asked, trying not to let the bitterness seep through my words. "No, not yet. Still waiting on the cash." She shrugged like it was no big deal, but the way she looked at me told a different story. She wasn't upset. Not with me, at least. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about the money, either. It was the fact that I hadn't helped. That's what stung. She didn't care about me or my birthday. It was all about what I could do for her. "Did Mom ever ask you about my birthday?" I finally asked, not even sure why I said it, but it felt like the right moment. Maybe if I just confronted her, it would make things better, or at least allow me to understand why they acted the way they did. She blinked, confused for a second, before shrugging. "I don't think so. She probably thought you were just too busy. You know how she is." Too busy? I wasn't too busy. I spent the whole day staring at my phone. I could barely drag myself out of bed. But instead of admitting how hurt I was, I just nodded and let it slide, telling myself that maybe I was being too sensitive. After all, it was just a birthday, right? Just a stupid day that didn't mean anything to them. But the truth was, it hurt more than I ever imagined it would. This was family, and it felt like I wasn't even a part of it anymore. A few days passed, and I noticed that the coldness wasn't just from my sister. When I finally spoke to my mom again, she didn't apologize for the way she'd acted. There was no explanation for why she hadn't said a word on my birthday. It was like everything that happened just didn't matter. We hadn't even talked about what I had said when I left the house. I knew she was avoiding me, and I was sick of pretending that everything was fine. When I finally tried to ask her, she just shrugged and said, "You're being dramatic. You're an adult now. Birthdays aren't as important as you think." I couldn't believe it. I wanted to scream, to let her know how much that one comment had cut deeper than any of the other things that had happened, but I held it in. I couldn't even look at her. The disappointment was overwhelming. This was the woman who had raised me, who should have known how much a simple birthday acknowledgement could mean, but it seemed she couldn't care less. I stayed quiet for days, trying to process what had happened, but it wasn't working. I was frustrated, angry, and lost. I kept thinking back to everything that had led up to that point. The way they had all forgotten me. The way they acted like it didn't matter. The way I was expected to just give and give without receiving anything in return. Then one day, I saw something on my sister's Instagram. A picture of the dress she had wanted. She was wearing it, laughing with her friends, looking like the happiest person on earth. My stomach twisted. How had she gotten the money for it? Was it from someone else? Did she not care about my birthday at all? I hated myself for even caring. I had no idea why it bothered me so much, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I knew I had to confront her again, but I wasn't sure I was ready. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like it didn't matter. But I couldn't. I had to know. I needed answers. So I called her. She answered on the third ring, sounding cheerful, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, what's up?" I paused for a second before speaking, trying to keep my voice calm. "How'd you afford that dress?" the one from the boutique? There was a slight hesitation on the other end of the line. Oh, I found a way. Don't worry about it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She wasn't even going to tell me how she got the money. The truth hit me hard. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I asked, a little more forcefully this time. Her voice shifted, becoming defensive. What are you trying to say? I didn't ask you for the money. I didn't expect you to help. But you asked me before. You made it clear that you thought I should just give it to you. I said, feeling my anger rise. And now you're walking around in that dress, like it's no big deal? Like I didn't just get completely ignored on my birthday. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice suddenly quieter. I didn't want to upset you. I didn't want to make things worse. But you're making it worse by bringing it up now. I could feel my blood boiling. I had been trying to be the bigger person, to understand, but this was too much. I'm not making it worse. You are. You've been acting like I don't matter. Like none of this matters. I was hurt, and you didn't care. You still don't care. I hung up the phone before she could say anything else. I knew that my family was never going to be the same again. It wasn't just the money, or the dress, or even the birthday. It was everything leading up to it. They had taken me for granted, assuming I would always be there to pick up the pieces. But I was done. If they couldn't even acknowledge that I was hurt, then I didn't want to be a part of their world anymore. And yet, I was still angry with myself. Because as much as they had hurt me, I couldn't just walk away. I still love them. I just couldn't understand how they could hurt me like this and act like everything was fine. The more I thought about it, the more confused I became. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Not anymore. I had almost convinced myself to let it all go, to walk away from my family and their indifference. After all, they had made it clear they didn't care about me or my birthday, and they were too wrapped up in their own world to notice the cracks in ours. But despite all the anger and resentment building up inside me, something in the back of my mind kept telling me to hold on, that maybe there was something I was missing, some reason for the way they were treating me. I was still spiraling when I ran into my cousin, Clara, at a coffee shop one evening. I hadn't seen her in a while. We'd always gotten along, but we hadn't really talked much in the past couple of months, mostly because I'd been staying out of family events and trying to avoid the awkwardness that had built up between me and everyone. But that night, Clara was sitting by herself, sipping on a latte and typing away at her phone. Clara, I called out, unsure if she would even recognize me with how little we'd kept in touch. She looked up from her phone, her face breaking into a smile when she saw me. Hey, it's been forever. What's up? I slid into the chair across from her, still unsure if I wanted to spill everything to her just yet. But there was something about her, something I couldn't quite place, that made me feel like I could. Clara had always been the calm one in our family, the one who saw things from a different perspective. And more than that, she was someone who could tell me the truth without sugarcoating it. You know, same old stuff, I said, trying to sound casual. Work, life, and family drama, of course. I couldn't stop myself from sounding bitter. Clara raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing the change in my tone. Family drama, huh? You're going to have to explain that one. I hesitated, glancing around the coffee shop before leaning in slightly. It's just, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. Clara didn't push me. Instead, she waited quietly, giving me space to figure out how much I was willing to share. Finally, I decided to tell her. She was family, after all. If anyone could help me make sense of what had happened, it was her. My birthday was last week. I began, watching Clara's face closely as I spoke. And my family completely forgot about it. No texts, no calls, nothing. I ended up going to their house, hoping for something. But all I got was silence. No one even acknowledged it. And when I couldn't help my sister with money for some clothes she wanted, they acted like I was the one who was being unreasonable. Clara's eyes softened as she listened, her expression thoughtful. I was expecting her to offer some kind of sympathy, but she didn't. Instead, she just nodded like she understood, and it was that simple act that made me feel like I could keep going. And then, when I tried to bring it up, my mom just brushed me off. I continued, frustration seeping into my voice. She said I was being dramatic, that birthdays weren't a big deal anymore, that I was just being childish. And it hit me, you know? It felt like none of it mattered to them, like I didn't matter. There was a long pause before Clara said anything. She didn't immediately jump in with advice or try to defend my family. She just sat there, sipping her latte slowly, as though weighing something carefully. You know, it's funny, Clara finally said, her voice calm. I've been hearing a lot about that lately. Not just from you, but from others in the family too. What do you mean? I asked, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Clara set her cup down and leaned forward slightly, her eyes more serious now. I'm not saying this to make you feel worse, but I've been hearing some things about how your mom and sister have been treating people lately. Not just you, everyone. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she was about to say, but I had to. I needed to know. Like what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara hesitated again, glancing around the coffee shop to make sure no one was listening in. I don't know all the details, but I've overheard conversations. Your sister has been asking people for money too. Not just you. And it's been getting pretty bad. What do you mean by getting bad? I asked, feeling my anxiety creep up. Clara shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable. It's like they've been treating people like they owe them something. Your mom's been acting weird too, like she's been trying to get people to take care of her more than usual, if you know what I mean. Like she's been leaning on everyone else for support, but not in a healthy way. I sat back in my chair, stunned by what Clara was saying. I had no idea what to make of it. It was one thing for my mom to be a little distant or for my sister to be self-centered, but this sounded like something else entirely. It was like they were feeding off of others, using guilt to manipulate people into giving them what they wanted. Clara seemed to sense my confusion, and she quickly added, Look, I'm not saying they're bad people, but they've been acting different lately. I think there's a lot going on that you don't know about, stuff that they're hiding from everyone else. It's not just you they've been neglecting, it's everyone. I shook my head, trying to process everything. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath me. But why wouldn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell me what was going on? I feel like I've been left out of the loop, like I don't even know my own family anymore. Clara reached across the table and placed a hand on mine. I don't know why they're acting this way, but I do know that you're not alone in this. You're not the only one they've hurt. And maybe it's time to stop trying to fix everything for them. Maybe it's time to take care of yourself first. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe I didn't have to fix everything. Maybe I didn't have to keep trying to make things right with people who weren't even trying with me. But as Clara spoke, I realized that something bigger was going on, something I had no idea about. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to uncover the full truth. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to stand by and let myself be manipulated any longer. It was time to stop pretending everything was fine. I had to know what was really going on, and I wasn't going to let my family's lies keep me in the dark any longer. The following days felt like an endless spiral. Everything I had hoped for, everything I had tried to make sense of, was falling apart before my eyes. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, none of them good, all of them making me question every interaction I'd had with my family. Clara had opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through, but now it was impossible to ignore. There was something deeper going on, something bigger than just my sister's shallow desire for expensive clothes or my mom's disinterest in celebrating me. I tried to reach out to my sister again, hoping to talk to her one-on-one and maybe get some clarity. But each time I called, there was either no answer or a vague excuse. I started to feel like I was chasing ghosts, desperately trying to make sense of a family that felt like it was slowly slipping away. And every time I saw them interact with each other, they looked so unaffected, so oblivious to the growing tension I was feeling. It was like they were acting as though nothing was wrong, while I was suffocating in silence. Finally, I decided to confront my mother directly. I wasn't going to wait anymore. This had been going on long enough. I wasn't going to let her brush me off again. I called her one afternoon, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in my chest as I waited for her to pick up. When she finally answered, I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Hey," she said, almost distractedly. "What's up? Can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I knew if I didn't get to the heart of it now, I might never get the chance. "Sure, what's going on?" she asked, though I could tell she wasn't really listening. "Why didn't you say anything to me on my birthday? Why didn't you care?" The question hung in the air, charged with all the hurt and frustration I had been holding in. I could almost hear her hesitate on the other end of the line before she finally spoke. I told you already, birthdays aren't that important anymore, she said, her tone defensive, like she was trying to justify her indifference. That's not an answer. I nearly shouted, my patience wearing thin. You didn't even send me a message, a text, nothing. And now I find out that things have been weird with the family. Why didn't you tell me what was really going on? There was a long silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for her response. And when she finally spoke again, it was like a door had opened, revealing something I wasn't ready for. It's not what you think, she said, her voice quiet now, almost as if she were ashamed. It's been hard. I've been trying to handle things on my own, but I didn't want to worry you. Trying to handle what? What's going on? My voice wavered with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Just tell me the truth. I heard her take a deep breath before she spoke again. I didn't want to tell you because I knew you'd feel guilty. I've been struggling with money lately, and it's been harder than I care to admit. I've been hiding it from everyone, including you. Your father and I aren't doing as well as we used to. We've been falling behind on bills, and I've been borrowing money from people trying to keep everything together. Your sister, she's been asking for things, and I just didn't know how to say no. It's been hard. I felt my stomach drop. The words she was saying didn't make sense. They were pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. And now, hearing them out loud, I didn't know what to think. My mother had been struggling, hiding it from all of us, while acting like nothing was wrong. And here I was, furious at her for not acknowledging my birthday, when she had been silently carrying a burden I had no idea about. But why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softer now, a mix of confusion and anger. Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me what was really going on? I could have helped. I would have. She sighed heavily, the weight of her words pressing down on her. I didn't want to burden you with it. You've got enough on your plate. I didn't want to drag you into it. I felt a rush of emotions, betrayal, frustration, sympathy, crash over me. My mother had been carrying this weight on her own, and I had been so focused on my own hurt that I hadn't even noticed. She had tried to protect me, but in doing so, she had shut me out. And in turn, I had shut her out, not knowing the truth. So, all this time, everything that's been happening, you've been hiding it from me? I asked, struggling to wrap my head around it all. And when I couldn't help my sister with the money for her clothes, that's why it was such a big deal. She paused again, like she was trying to find the right words. It wasn't just about the money. It was about me feeling like I was failing as a mother. I know I should have been more open with you, but I didn't want to admit to myself that things were falling apart. I was quiet for a moment, trying to process everything she had said. The anger I had been holding on to began to fade, replaced by a heavy sense of guilt. I had been so wrapped up in my own feelings that I hadn't even stopped to consider what might have been going on with her. I had been angry at her for ignoring my birthday, for not celebrating me, but I hadn't seen that she had been fighting her own battles, silently alone. Mom, I didn't know, I said, my voice quieter now. I'm sorry. I had no idea. She let out a soft laugh, but it didn't sound happy. I know. I should have told you, but I didn't know how to ask for help. I sat there for a long moment, the weight of everything settling over me. I had always thought that family was supposed to be there for you, that they were supposed to protect you, but sometimes it felt like we were all just pretending to be okay. And the truth was, none of us were. We had all been carrying our own burdens, too afraid to admit that we couldn't do it alone. I'm sorry, I said again, this time meaning it. I shouldn't have been so hard on you. We're a family. We should have talked about all of this sooner. There was a long pause before my mom responded, her voice softer now. It's not too late. We can still fix this. We just need to be honest with each other. And maybe, just maybe, stop pretending everything is fine when it's not. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like maybe we could fix things. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but at least we could start being honest with each other. That was something, at least, a small step in the right direction. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind. Everything had changed, but nothing had really been resolved. There were moments when the tension between my mother, sister, and me would ease, and I'd think that maybe things were starting to heal. But then, just as quickly, I'd be reminded of how deep the wounds went. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about the birthday that had been forgotten. It was about years of quiet resentments, unspoken expectations, and people trying to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders without anyone else noticing. After my conversation with my mom, I tried to reach out more to her to bridge the gap that had formed between us. I began helping around the house more, trying to show her that I wasn't going to let her struggle alone anymore. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I would find myself frustrated, wondering why she had kept so much hidden from me for so long. I still couldn't quite wrap my head around why she hadn't told me sooner, why she had let everything get to this point. But I tried to remind myself that she hadn't wanted to burden me. And as much as that angered me, I knew I couldn't change the past. It was the small things that started to matter. The quiet conversations when we were both doing dishes or folding laundry. The way she would look at me, almost as if she were silently apologizing for everything she hadn't said. And when she would let out a little laugh, a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like forever, I'd remind myself that this was a step. A hard, painful step, but a step nonetheless. My sister, on the other hand, was a different story. She didn't seem to understand what had happened, or maybe she just didn't care. After the conversation with my mom, I tried to talk to her about the money situation, about why I hadn't been able to help her. But she brushed me off like it was no big deal. "You're just mad because Mom didn't throw you a party," she said one evening, almost laughing. "It's not like I can help what I want. Just get over it." I felt my blood boil at her indifference, but I didn't want to fight. Not again. Not with her. I wanted to understand, to find some way to connect with her, but she was so wrapped up in her own world, in her own needs, that she couldn't, or wouldn't, see what was really going on. I took a deep breath and let it go, deciding that some things were just beyond my control. I couldn't change her, and I couldn't fix everything. As much as I wanted to, I knew that if she didn't want to understand, I couldn't make her. So, I chose to focus on the small victories, the little moments when my mom would smile at me in gratitude, or when she'd admit that she was struggling but didn't know how to ask for help. But things weren't always so simple. There were still times when I would feel like I was living in a house full of strangers. Moments when the weight of what had been left unsaid hung heavily in the air, and I couldn't tell if we were making progress or just pretending that things were okay. I couldn't tell if the healing was real or just a temporary fix, like a bandage over a wound that was too deep to heal properly. One night, about a month after everything had started to unravel, I was sitting in the living room when my mom came in, holding a letter in her hands. She looked nervous, almost hesitant, like she wasn't sure how to approach me. I raised an eyebrow, wondering what it was about. "What's that?" I asked, motioning toward the letter. She glanced down at it and then back up at me, biting her lip. "It's a bill," she said, her voice quiet. "It's overdue. We don't have enough to cover it, and I don't know what to do." I could see the strain in her eyes, the worry that she tried so hard to hide from everyone. My first instinct was to snap at her, to ask her why she hadn't told me sooner. But instead, I just nodded, trying to keep my composure. "Let's figure it out together," I said, standing up. "We'll work it out." It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, we were starting to pull ourselves out of this mess. My mom looked at me, a mixture of relief and guilt flashing across her face. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice breaking a little. "I don't know what I would have done without you." And for the first time in a long time, I realized that this was what it meant to be a family. It wasn't about big gestures or perfect birthdays or pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It was about being there for each other when things were tough, about carrying each other's burdens when it felt too heavy to bear alone. It was about learning to be honest, even when it hurt. And in that moment, I knew that I wasn't alone anymore. My mom wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, my sister would figure it out too. As I sat there, helping my mom go through the bill and making a plan to pay it off over time, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. There was still so much work to be done, so many things that needed to be said, but we had taken the first step. And sometimes, that was all you could do. Take it one day at a time, one conversation at a time, and eventually, things would start to fall into place. I didn't know what the future held for me and my family. I didn't know if my sister would ever understand, or if things with my mom would always be this fragile. But I did know that we were trying, and that was enough for now. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.